Previously, we talked about a couple of different types of loops that Java provides. In fact, we talked about 3 of them: the pre-test condition, post-test condition, the counting loop, and now we want to talk about the 4th loop. This is newer to Java. It was not always in Java, and it's only been around for a few years. And that's the Foreach loop. A lot of your more modern languages are coming out with Foreach because it's a little bit simpler to understand and there's not so many extra values to work with. Let's take a quick look at a Foreach loop and some potential challenges with using it inside of Java. So I have my 2 arrays that I did before, as well as an integer x that we're going to look at in just a minute. And I want to simply create a Foreach loop. Now I'm just going to say for. I don't have to actually say for each. And then I need to know which one am I going to look at. Let's start with our array of names. So I'm going to say string, and I'm just going to call this temp name. Do a colon, and then names my array of elements that I want to loop through. I'm going to say system.out println. And notice Visual Studio Code was nice enough to say, hey, I bet you want to use temp name in here, and it put it in there for us. I'm going to save this and run it. And you notice it prints out each name one at a time. I don't have to keep track of indices. I don't have to increment indices or anything like that. It does simplify a few things for us. But there is a drawback. For example, I have to go through every element of my array. How many elements are there? Well, I could have 4 like in this case, or I could have 4,000. What happens if I only need to grab a certain number? Doesn't matter. What happens if I want to start someplace that's not the beginning? Doesn't matter. I always start the beginning, go all the way through my array, and then end. Now, a nice thing is the fact that I'm not limited to arrays. Anything that I can iterate over will let me use that for each loop in Java. So it is kind of nice. It's a little simpler as far as that goes. But I do have another small challenge, and I want to go through it with my numbers. So I'm just going to delete this real quick and say for, just like I did before. In this case, int. I'm going to say num : numbers. Inside my loop body, I'm going to do system.out println, and then I'm going to specify num. And at this point, when I save and run this, it works just like I did before. But what if I want to assign num a value? So I'm going to come over here and say num equals x. And then I'm going to come down here and say x++. Now, if I go and do this, you're going to see real quick that it's still going to print out all zeros, but you're assuming that after I printed out the 0, it gave me a value. And I can come in here and maybe show this real quick by saying system.out println num again. And when I run it, you'll notice that it sees 0, then it gives me a number. 0 gives me a new number. 0, that incremented number again. I'm getting what I think I should have. But I'm going to come down here real quick to my regular for loop. I'm going to save and run it. And you notice that it prints out all zeros at the end. So even though it printed out the changed value, it didn't seem to save it. And that's exactly what happened. That temporary value that's used in the for each, in this case, num. Remember previously I said it was temp name, and I had that temp in there to let you know that, hey, this is temporary. Once it gets through that loop body, it's forgotten. We don't actually set the value that we originally had. On the other hand, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this for loop. Move it up here, and I'm going to specify, okay, yeah, I know it's 0, but I'm going to then say numbers at I equals x and x++, just like we saw before with the for each loop. However, inside my for each loop, I'm just going to print out those values. So notice I have two separate loops. When I go and run them, you notice that I first just see those zeros because that's that initial value. But when I print the second time, I get numbers there. And that's because I can modify the value of an array when I use a standard loop. So which is better? Well, it depends on what you need. If all you're doing is reading data, the Foreach will probably work just fine for you, especially if you need the whole array. If you'll need part of the array, or if you need to modify data in the array, then you need to use the for loop. Just something to keep in mind when you're using the Foreach loop and the for loop inside of Java. Hopefully you found this video helpful and it's gave you some good insights. If so, please give the video a like. It just lets me know that I'm doing a good job in helping you out. Also, you might want to consider subscribing if you're using this to learn how to program.